Okay, so today we're going to be going over what is functional training, okay? Now, functional training is a term that you hear in the fitness industry get thrown around a lot, okay? Like, you kind of heard that with, like, the creation of CrossFit, that CrossFit is more functional than bodybuilding or something like that. But nobody really ever determines what that means. Even when I was going through, school at Cortland, one thing that we would talk about all the time is functional training, or about how kettlebell training is more functional than barbell or dumbbell training. And again, it was kind of like an abstract term that people were all kind of just accepted until you started to actually ask questions as to what that actually meant. And then a bunch of the higher ups at that time didn't even really have a good answer to that question, okay? So you can probably go on Instagram right now and find a lot of people who are trying to sell functional training, or training that is really not really defining what that term means, but they're still using it as a selling point. So I'm going to kind of go over what that is and kind of how they're using it is kind of just bullshit marketing techniques, and then to really help you understand what they're trying to say, what it actually means, and how to kind of be wary of people who are just trying to sell you things, okay? So when you really start to dive deep into what training is, you'll find out that there's really two types of training, okay? And what I have them here is there is functional training, okay? And then there is structural training, okay? So I'm not saying that functional is not a term, it's just you'll kind of find out over the course of this video is that functional has kind of been skewed to mean things based on marketing that's not really actually what it means, okay? So functional training actually means is it's involving the nervous system, okay? So functional training is a nervous system's function or nervous system stimulation to elicit muscle contraction, okay? So that's what that means. It's the function of the nervous system is to stimulate muscles to contract, okay? Then structural training is training done to elicit structural changes, okay? That's basically it. That is basically all forms of training, okay? It's either to elicit changes in the nervous system stimulation of the muscle, or it's to elicit changes in the actual muscle structure, or as you find out, tendon structure or bone structure itself. So it depends on, again, it really is going to depend on your emphasis of the training. So whether you're trying to increase the nervous system power output or nervous system force output, or get bigger muscles, like in a bodybuilding style training, or as you've seen a little bit, how they kind of overlap, okay? So training that is more specifically functional, okay? All that means is that what you're going for is you're trying to increase the functional output of the nervous system, okay? So what that means is that you're trying to increase the amount of either strength or power or speed that you move at, okay? Since those are factors that are really determined by how fast or how much nervous system stimulation that you have, okay? So as you can see over here, things that I have that are specifically functional training are heavy training, speed work, what do I have there? Plyos, sprints, and then med ball throws, okay? All of those, their emphasis is to really increase and test your nervous system's ability to output force, okay? Then, structural training, being on the other side of that. So structural training is training that is done to elicit muscle hypertrophy, connective tissue hypertrophy, or to strengthen bone, okay? And it's done to, like I said before, it's done to specifically elicit structural changes, okay? So, like I said, structural changes, all bodybuilding type of training, different sort of accessory movements that I have joking on down there. Curls, right? Curls are kind of the classic example of structural training. Everybody wants big biceps, whether you know it or not. Trust me, you do. So it's done specifically to build bigger muscle, okay? Now, here's where all of that starts to overlap, okay? So we have the functional training, which is the purpose is to stimulate the nervous system's ability to produce force, and then we have the structural training, actually changing the structure of your body, training that's actually done to change the structure, the tools that you have, the things that build your actual body, right? What you have when you start to dig into training, you realize that there's certain structural changes that are actually elicited by heavy strength training too, okay? So say you're performing a heavy back squat, okay? 1 rep max, okay? Doesn't matter, heavy, whatever. While the purpose might be to actually increase your strength, okay? Other things that are happening are tendon changes. When your muscles contract harder, they pull on a tendon harder, okay? When you pull on a tendon harder, that can actually stimulate increase in tendon strength and density, okay? When you have a heavy load on your spine, it can actually cause microfractures in your vertebrae, okay? That through the process of recovery, your bone actually heals together stronger, okay? So that sounds like, even though your emphasis was the functional change or the functional adaptation through that training, which would be increased strength, there are also structural changes that are happening with that training, okay? So that kind of show, even another example, sprinting, okay? We're trying to go as fast as we can, produce as much force as we can in a short amount of time, okay? Well, there's increased speed load, so the faster you go actually places more stress on your tendons and ligaments, okay? And sprinting has been shown to actually increase the amount of ligament mass that you have, or increase the density and mass of ligaments in your body, okay? So again, even though your purpose was the function of the body, okay, your nervous system's ability to produce force quickly in that speed, strength, movement of that sprint, there are also structural changes that are happening because of that nervous system stimulation, okay? So now that we kind of see how functional training is also structural training, how is structural training also functional training, okay? So let's take that bicep curl example. If you're performing a bicep curl just purely for the fact of getting bigger muscles, okay? Awesome. But what that actually does, if we look at the definition before, it requires nervous system stimulation in order to produce that muscular contraction, okay? So even if you're doing structural changes, accessory works, bodybuilding style training, your nervous system is still stimulating those muscles to contract in that specific way. So you are still teaching your body how to contract those muscles in a specific way, even though your emphasis or what you want out of that training is structural change, okay? So both these two types of training are basically the same thing, okay? Again, it's really just going to be on your emphasis, whether or not you want functional outputs, meaning an increased ability of the nervous system to produce force, or if you want structural change, meaning bigger muscles, bigger connective tissue, bone, doesn't matter, okay? So when somebody says that their training is more functional than another style of training, that literally makes no sense, because what they're then saying is that their style of training stimulates the nervous system more than other styles of training that stimulate the nervous system. So again, while you can have an emphasis on one or the other, all training that is done to more of like movement-based, strength-based, speed and power-based is all functional. What people are actually saying with it, or trying to say with that, is that maybe excessive bodybuilding style bulk does not translate well into better movement quality in everyday life activities or in athletics, okay? but that's not really, again, what functional training means. That's just proper training based on your goals, okay? If you're a bodybuilder, you should train like a bodybuilder to look like a bodybuilder and to perform like a bodybuilder. If you're a basketball player, you should train to be the best basketball player you can be, okay? Now, even if you're training to be the best basketball player you can be, that's still going to require functional training and structural training, because we want to increase the size of your tendons and ligaments to be a little bit more bulletproof and store more elastic energy so you can jump higher, okay? We want you to have, bigger hamstring muscles and glute muscles and calf muscles, because those can basically be like more of a protective mechanism, so that you have less chance of injury. So we're going to be performing structural hypertrophy work in specific muscle groups so that you are more bulletproof. Or like we do arms with our basketball players too, obviously, because you need to, pushing people around for rebounds. If you fall on your shoulder or something, that muscle acts as body armor to actually protect you, okay? But then we perform plyometrics, which would be a functional training or a functional training stimulus to try to jump higher, okay? So there's no such thing as one training program that's more functional than another training program, okay? All training programs require stimulation of the nervous system, like we just said, okay? Even a bodybuilding style program, even though its emphasis is to elicit structural change, it still requires stimulation of the nervous system for your muscles to actually work, right? So CrossFit is not more functional for everyday life activities than a powerlifting or West Side program is, because they're both stimulating the nervous system to elicit a certain outcome, okay? That is functional change, that is functional training, okay? Again, what we was talking about before was that a lot of people just mean that their program is more functional than the other because it might not necessarily get you jacked, which might be okay depending on your goals, okay? So don't get fooled by somebody who's trying to sell training that is more functional than somebody else's program. That really is just a misunderstanding of what those terms actually mean, okay? So again, just go over it. Functional training is stimulation of the nervous system to produce a force output or to demonstrate strength in a certain way, okay? Structural training is training that's done to elicit certain structural changes, okay, but still requires stimulation of the nervous system in order to elicit those structural changes, okay? So don't get got by the snake oil salesmen who are on Instagram who say that, or YouTube, wherever you find them, that say that their program is more functional than the other. It just means they haven't read enough books yet.